Ah yes, hello there, and welcome to another edition of On the Wireless. I am your host, Cuthbert Green-Williams. On today's show we have, of course, Mrs. Beecham with her proper housekeeping tips. Hello, Mrs. Beecham.
Hello, Cuthbert.
We have some light entertainment in the form of a French Mime live here in the studio, and he is going to perform for us today an excerpt from his show Les Grenouilles de Paris. And of course, Stanley Chesham-Smythe with all the weekly Crown Green Bowls news. But first, we're going to discuss a rather unsavoury matter, an issue that has been sweeping the nation at the moment, and that is the correct protocol for queuing, and how one should compose oneself with correct etiquette when involving oneself in the popular British pastime of forming an orderly queue in a civilized fashion. To discuss the issue with me today, we have the Right Honourable David Baxter, Member of Parliament for Chertsey West, and, of course, Minister of the Department of Queuing, Alignment and Ordination. Hello, David Baxter.
Hello.
We have Archibald Furrow, author of the popular book Waiting for Your Turn, When Should You? Hello, Archibald. Hello. We have a middle-class person, and we have the daughter of the chief executive of Asbestico and heiress to his multi-million-pound asbestos fortune, Miss Nancy Carruthers. Of course, herself a well-known socialite on the London scene. Hello, Nancy. Hello. Now, the real issue that we are facing at the moment, and one that has been talked about a lot in all of the national newspapers, is people are not following the correct protocol for queuing. Now, David, would you be able to elaborate on that issue any further?
Well, basically, Cuthbert, can I call you Cuthbert?
Oh yes, of course.
Cuthbert, the issue is that recently there has been a spate of incidents in London, of course, where people have not been following the correct protocol for queuing. They have, in fact, been pushing in.
Oh my gosh.
Which, of course, is deplorable and terribly un-British. So, people who have been waiting there for maybe 20 minutes to an hour are being served after people who have only been there for perhaps 5 or 10 minutes.
Oh gosh, that is most unpleasant, surely, for anyone in that situation.
Yes, of course. Now, we at the Department of Queuing, Alignment and Ordination, we have put together a proposal which will be put forward to the government and will be presented in Parliament within the next 2 weeks, which will bring down tougher sentences on pushers in.
Well, that is very pleasing to know. However, that isn't the view shared by all people, and in fact that perhaps the protocol is outdated. We all know that it is not, but some dissenters, such as you, Archibald, the author of Waiting for Your Turn, When Should You? Now, you disagree with the proposals, and in fact, think that the time-honoured art of forming an orderly queue is rather outdated and not very 20th century. You have, in fact, posited that perhaps a more continental approach to the issue, whereby people would not stand and form an orderly queue, but that you could, in fact, have a method where you take a number and you can sit in a chaotic fashion in a lobby or waiting room until your number is called. Now, of course, this is a rather sensitive matter in that it seems very, very foreign to us that we wouldn't actually be forming an orderly queue. In fact, no one would really know who would be next. Of course, you would know when it is your turn because you have the number, but you wouldn't know yourself who had got what number, if you see what I mean. Well, Cuthbert, you see, the approach the government is taking is a rather bizarre and archaic approach. I favour a more continental numbering system for waiting for your turn, as I would prefer to call it, rather than queuing. Of course, measures would have to be put in place, and signs, of course, but it seems a far more methodical solution to the problem, if you see what I mean.
No. You utter fool. The department is adamant on the issue that correct queuing protocol is the final solution to the matter.
Now, David, you can have your say in a minute, and discuss it further in a few moments, once we've heard what everybody has to propose. I would like to, Nancy, you are a socialite, and, you don't queue, do you?
No.
Now, that is very unusual, because your father is a stalwart of British industry, and a man who would have queued all his life. So what makes you so different?
Well, you see, the difference between me and the common queue is that I have money, and it should be that if you can afford it, you should pay to be first, if you see what I mean.
Well, no, because everybody knows that the first person in the queue is the first person to get served. Of course, first come, first served. And that is how British people have queued for centuries, you know. Of course, I'm not an expert on this matter, which is precisely why we have David and Archibald here, and a middle-class person just for representation, because we have certain quotas to fill these days. What say you, middle-class person?
Well, my contention is, and I've listened to all of your points. Now, for me, the common middle-class man, I go to the post office regularly, and I don't want to be sat down, taking a number, waiting to be called out. I want to go into the post office and form an orderly queue, you know, like my father used to do. You wanted to send a letter, you went and queued in the post office. All of this taking a number, and it's nonsense, you know. And I mean, I can't believe it. I'll be standing in lines in the post office some days, and some chaps just come and bloody stood in front of you. I'm just going to have to pause you there, middle-class person, because you cannot use profanity on the airwaves. So forget you heard that, listeners. And you can carry on with your diatribe, if you will, Mr. Middle-Class Person. Well, I was just saying, it's rather inconvenient that I want to send a letter or postal order for pay for my subscription to Golfers Weekly, and I'm stood there in a queue, and some chap just walks in and stands in front of me. You know, it's just not on. Now, you see, that is where the issue this is what we are putting forward in Parliament in the next 2 weeks, is that actually what we would propose is that there would be a police officer or a bespoke guard on duty to ensure that that does not happen. And, in fact, tougher sentences will be brought down on these pushers in, these people who butt in. It's just terribly, terribly un-British.
No, you see, You're using a terribly archaic 19th century, 18th century method for waiting for your turn, as I would rather call it in the 20th century. It's not queuing anymore.
No.
But simply, when you entered into a situation where you have to wait for your turn, you enter the building. So, for instance, middle-class person, as you mentioned, I think post offices, yes, that is one of the places that it is going to happen, where, as you mentioned, where gentlemen will come and they will not follow the protocol as currently exists, and will go and stand in front of people who are already waiting. But you see, what I am advocating is that, in fact, when you enter, you are given a ticket with a number on, and simply you sit down and you wait for your number being called. That way, people couldn't enter and butt in the queue, they couldn't butt in line, because they will have been issued with a ticket on entering the premises that would allow them to wait for their turn. Nobody would be put out, there would be no queue jumpers, no pushes in, there would be no paying your way to the front of the line, like certain people do. Everyone on an equal footing, waiting for their turn in the appropriate manner, in the new, modern, streamlined 20th century way.
No, but you see, what you are failing to address, Mr. Furrow, is that British people have always queued, and they have always queued in the same way. First come, first served.
Now, but you see, I'm not dismissing first come, first served. Obviously, it is just a refinement of that process, that you wouldn't have to stand in queue, you would simply be in a line, waiting for your turn, but a line that you can't visualize.
No, that's simply un-British. That is not the way. That's not the way we are raised within this wonderful empire. We are putting this proposal to Parliament over the next 2 weeks. As I have mentioned, correct protocol will be enforced, and that queue-jumping people will face much tougher sentences, and guards will be placed in popular queuing locations.
Well, thank the Lord for that, because I am sick to the teeth that I cannot just, I want to buy a stamp, right? I want one, the chap in front of me wants one, but then some other chap, who he wants one too, he walks into the post office, stands in front of me, and it's my turn next. What am I supposed to do about it? Well, I've not said much really, have I? I'm terribly sorry, I was in a daze. I was just thinking about having another gin and tonic. And, actually, listening to you, I don't have this problem because I send somebody to the post office for me. Yes. As do I, Miss Carruthers. But obviously a middle-class person can't do that. Oh? And this is an issue for people such as him, who do have to go and queue for themselves.
Oh, undoubtedly. I mean, as an MP, obviously, I don't queue for anything because I send people to go and do it for me.
Yes, I suppose actually so do I, but that's rather irrelevant. I still think that queue attendance will be a waste of taxpayers' money, and advocating a process whereby it was more continental, take a number, you're seated, there's no stress or untoward behavior involved, just a simple process, refined, no enforcement necessary other than that of the clerk in the establishment where one is waiting in line.
No. Just no. This is totally untenable. We are putting this through Parliament, as I have mentioned 3 times, that we are refining the existing first come, first served process. We are going to be enforcing it. People who do not follow correct protocol in informing a queue will be given tough sentences on a similar standing to treason, as it is completely un-British.
Well, thank you, David, gentlemen, Nancy. A fascinating discussion about a very dear topic. And it is pleasing to know that there are measures being taken to ensure that the correct protocol for queuing in the British manner is going to be enforced, but unfortunately we must move on. Now, how many of you have been to France? If you would please send us a telegram in the usual fashion to us here at the station, we shall answer that poll in the next program. And as many of you are wondering, the answer to the last question, thank you for your telegrams, the question was, how many of you will be affected by the closing down of the number 7 omnibus service? And that was 756 of you will be affected by the closure. But moving on, we have a little bit of live entertainment for you all, because we have a mime here in the studio. He has come all the way from Paris, and he is a Frenchman, so don't let that be held against him. Now, in a little change to the usual format of our interviews, he shall be performing for us his answers to my questions instead of having the interview first and performing for us afterwards. Now, hello, Marcel. Yes, he is miming at me that he is in fact pleased to see me, and he is in fact shaking my hand as I speak. Yes, likewise, it is a pleasure to meet you, Marcel. Now, what is it that you are going to be performing for us today, live on the air? He seems to be trapped in some sort of box. Yes, there's clearly no way of getting out of that box. He looks quite trapped. Did you, in fact, have a pleasant journey across the Channel to London from France? He is indicating to me here in the studio that he did, in fact, encounter quite a lot of wind on his journey, and it is causing him to take rather more steps backwards than forwards, so it is interesting to know quite how, in fact, he did arrive here in London from Paris. Did you have any further issues with your crossing? He is indicating to me that he was trapped behind a perfectly flat sheet of glass, obviously manufactured in Britain, because as we all know, the world's finest glass is manufactured here in Britain. And Marcel, is there anything in particular that you would like to be doing here in London? Of course, when you are not performing, which you are at the Palladium, yes? For the next 2 weeks. It sounds splendid. Tickets are priced at 3 shillings for anyone who would be interested in going. So, yes, was there anything in particular that you wanted to look at while you are here in this fabulous city, the capital of the empire? It seems to me that he is indicating to us here in the studio that he would rather like to be pulling on a length of rope, which he is miming to us. Oh, and now he is standing stock still. Yes, he is not moving at all. Splendid. Well, that was most fascinating. Thank you very much, Marcel. He will be performing his show, Les Grenouilles de Paris, as I stated, at the Palladium for 2 weeks. Tickets priced at 3 shillings. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcel. And now it is that time again for me to pass over the reins to Mrs. Beecham for her segment on proper housekeeping.
Thank you, Cuthbert. Now, as you know, we were doing a series on the correct process for dealing with your servants. Here's another tip for you. If you happen to go upstairs to one of your handmaiden's chambers and you find her with a young gentleman, The obvious course of action would be to take the young gentleman into your parlor or your kitchen and castrate him. Now, while this seems the most obvious course of action, this is not actually the proper housekeeping way to deal with that situation. What you actually should be doing is taking the young gentleman into the kitchen and flaying him, not castrating him. I know there has been some trouble with this in recent times, and what you should do is actually dock the maid's pay by half for 6 months, and that should rectify the problem. And I also have a recipe for you today for a larded stoat pottage, which is a lovely winter warming dish. And here is the recipe. If you would join me, Cuthbert, and you can have a taste while I am making it. Now, as it is stoat season, your groundman should be bringing you a lot of fresh stoat from your estate. But if you do not have that much money, you can also use stoat jelly, which you can make in advance, and it preserves quite well. So the first step is that you need 1.5 pounds of lard, and it has to be good quality lard. It has to be clear. And then you need a pound of stoat, or you can use 1.5 pounds of pre-prepared stoat jelly. And which one you use actually it changes the recipe somewhat, because you then need 2 pints worth of stock, but if you are using the jelly, you can use 1 pint of stock and 1 pint of hot water, as the jelly will make the additional level of stock in the recipe. You also need sage, marjoram, thyme, and tarragon for the herbs, and one pound of roughly chopped potatoes, and a loaf of stale soda bread. The recipe is as follows. Simply give all the ingredients to your cook, and she will prepare it for you. And here is one that she has prepared for us in the studio. Cuthbert, if you would like to come over and have a little taste.
Oh yes, that is most splendid. That is absolutely delicious.
Yes, that is, of course, thanks to the studio cook, who cooks for all of the crew and us, of course.
Yes, that is it's a real winter warming dish. It's most delicious. The level of herbs in there, and of course the lard gives it a really nice homely flavour. You know.
Yes, of course, it's a very British sort of dish. And, of course, no main course would be complete without a pudding, so we have caramel apple pie. The recipe is you need 1 pound of short crust pastry. You will need 1 pound of Bramley apples. You will need sugar, milk, and flour. And then, of course, the recipe is that you give it to your cook and she will prepare it for you. And here we have one that she has made for us. And Cuthbert, if you would like to taste the caramel apple pie.
Oh yeah. Actually, after having the pottage, the larded stoat pottage, this pie it's very, very good. It's very sweet, and it has the right sort of consistency that you would be looking forward to after having a fatty larded stoat pottage. Yes, it's very, very, very stodgy. It's delicious.
Yes, that is the quintessential essence of British cooking is that it has a lot of fat in there.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Beecham. And we will join you again next time for more tips and recipes that you yourself can prepare at home. But now it is the time for our final segment, and that is Stanley Chesham-Smythe with the roundup of all the week's Crown Green Bowls news.
Hello there. Hello. Yes, Norfolk against Suffolk in Derby match. 25 to 17, 25 to 16, and 25 to 32. 25 to 3, sorry. No. And then Cambridgeshire, Huntingdonshire, a similar situation, 25-7. 25-6 and 25-17, a close game there between Smythe and Waterford. But there was a time when a man could walk down the street in London and not have to worry about. There was a young chap there, anyway. In the Welsh League, Flintshire, Denbighshire, that happened again to Denbighshire 25, and then again to Flintshire 25-7, and then again to Denbighshire 25-17, and the game ending in a tie. Yorkshire against Northumberland, split between the counties there, and Yorkshire again taking the first steps, and Northumberland for 25, but then Yorkshire for 25-7, and Hampshire, Oxfordshire, yes, common. And I just remember that once it was just easy. There wasn't all these riffraff in the streets. One could wander peacefully in London, and there would be no motor cars, and there'd be no ruffians, and no roistered oysters, and you could just have a Warwickshire, Leicestershire. Yes, 25-17, 25-23, a very close game there, Warwickshire, Leicestershire, and Rutland, Nottinghamshire. There was an incident in that match where one of the chaps from Rutland, I forget his name, a dog ran onto the field of play, and it just so happens that I once had a dog. Yes, many years ago, I think it was 1876, just before, the advent of, everything changing, and then Shropshire, Staffordshire, another close one, with Morton from Malcop. He broke his thigh in that match, eventually going to Cheshire, and then finally Selkirkshire in Scotland, East Lothian, that was 25-7, 25-16, 25-15 to Lanarkshire. And thank you, and next week I will be back with all the Crown Green Bowls news. Back to you, Cuthbert.
Yes, thank you, Stanley, for that weekly update on all the Crown Green Bowls news, and I'm sure all of our listeners were delighted to know the standings and results from all the happenings in the United Kingdom this week. And sadly, that is the end of another edition of On the Wireless. Thank you to all of our guests today, and I have been Cuthbert Green-Williams, and I hope you join us all next time for another edition of On the Wireless. Goodbye.